I want to give a couple of analogies to the search for the self, and in particular, the riddle of inquiry and how that works. Um, the riddle of self inquiry is trying to show you that what you take to be a particular thing, a particular object, namely your basic common sense, everyday, mundane experience of the eye that feels like you, the eye that seems to be walking and talking and hearing and seeing everything, is actually kind of a carefully constructed and inscrutable illusion. And that what you actually are is not that at all. So, what it gets you to do is to examine very closely the sense of the eye and to show you a pattern that doesn't fit with your usual theory of what you are, which is a thinking, doing, experiencing person. And so a couple of analogies I have for this are silence and space. So let's think about silence. Let's suppose you didn't quite know what silence was. You had some idea that it was whatever it was that was between words. Whatever the space between words was. And so every time you uttered a word, you know that something precedes the word and something is after the word, and that seems to be this thing called silence. And so in searching for this thing called silence, if you were searching for really what silence really was, maybe you learn to extend that space. The space between words, the pauses between words become longer and longer. Maybe even the pauses between syllables. And finally, there comes a long pause. This seems to be silence. But as soon as you wonder out loud, is this silence? You've broken it. So there's something which permits words to be spoken. And if you were told, if you had a sense that the silence you were looking for was something deeper than just the silence that was then interrupted. It was something that had to be more permanent. Then you might say, where does the silence go when words are spoken? You know, you start by creating the spaces between words, and you get to what appear to be longer and longer pauses. But these pauses have beginnings and ends. So can that really be silence in itself? What is silence in itself, you ask? But every time you ask that question during a pause, it interrupts the pause. There's a kind of perspectival change that has to happen here where the silence, which is conceived of as the space between words, which is marked off by having a word at the beginning and a word at the end. I mean, sound at the beginning. I say word, but it could be any sound. Is only a reflection of a deeper silence. A silence that continues even when sounds are made. If the definition of silence that you were looking for, if you were looking for the silence, which is what permitted sounds to be heard, then when you got to that pause between words, you'd have to ask, what permits even this pause to be noticed? This pause is like a very special word because it's marked off at the beginning and at the end by sound. So it permits the pause to be heard as a pause is what permits the words or sounds at the beginnings, at the ends, to be heard as well. That is to say, the silence that you're looking for, the actual silence, the true silence, is not actually definable as either a sound or as a pause between sounds. But it's something that underlies both and that permits both. The pause is just a kind of a clearer reflection of that thing which permits. Because when you get to that pause, the moment you say, well, what is this pause? You interrupt it. In that interruption, it's seen that the pause, as a pause, can't be the true silence. If by silence we mean that which is permitting all the sounds and the pauses to be understood as such. There's a silence which can't be interrupted by either sound or pauses between sound. And to make that shift between seeing silence as merely something which is defined or marked off as something with a sound at the beginning, at the end, to the underlying indescribable thing that permits both sound and the lack of sound to be noticed. That's what's going on with inquiry. That is to say, inquiry takes you in a hunt for the eye to a space of silence. If you hunt for the eye long enough, you get to a space of silence. But that space of silence is marked off by thought at the beginning and the end. So that silence can't be the true I. Not, at least, as you think of it. When you notice that silence, it's noticed because it has a thought at the beginning of it and a thought at the end of it. It comes and goes. It's temporary. It's transient. It's limited. It's contingent. But if you could notice that that silence which is between thoughts is actually a reflection of something which permits both thoughts and those silences. That is the perspectival shift. Another little analogy, a related analogy, thinking of sound and silence is, if you were wandering around a cave and you're trying to find the source of a sound, and you knew the sound would happen when you spoke or when you sang or hummed, but you hadn't connected the idea that the sound was actually coming from you. So you followed, where you went to different parts of the cave, and you uttered the sound, trying to figure out, well, where is the sound coming from? Where is it coming from? When I'm over here, it seems to be coming from over here. When I'm over there, it seems to be coming from over there. And then at a certain point, you realize when you stop making the sound that there's a silence. And that silence is indicating something about where the sound is actually coming from, which is to say, it's not coming from any particular point in the cave that's fixed. Silence is a reflection of the fact that the source of the sound isn't a fixed point. The I, which is the source of the sound, is wherever the body is in the cave. That's where the I appears to be. It's not coming from a fixed point, but it appears to be coming from a fixed point. The silence is sort of a reminder of that, essentially. The silence is trying to show you, in a sense, and this is also what happens when people sort of get very frustrated and give up, right? This is the idea behind koan sometimes, to get the mind so frustrated that it just stops, Silence sort of point to, you're looking for it in the wrong way. You're not going to find the source of the sound at a particular point in the cave, at any one fixed point. The silence is pointing to that. The silence is pointing to that. Recognize that the sound isn't coming from a fixed point. These are all imperfect analogies, but they're sort of pointing to the kind of shift that needs to happen. If you look at the idea of space, it's kind of the same thing. Well, what is space? Well, space is what permits something to occupy it. But what is space in itself, right? You could clear stuff out if you want to actually find space in itself, right? Clear all the stuff out. But there'll always be more stuff. There'll always be more stuff. You could even go into outer space. Even there's like probably subatomic particles and stuff like that floating around in any particular, cubic foot of space. But you could get pretty close, to fairly empty space. But is that fairly empty space the only kind of space? No. That space is just a space which is where the objects have been taken out. But that's not the only definition of space. Because what we're meant to do is to see the space where we take the object out so we can see a kind of reflection of what space is in itself. Outer space with nothing in it, that kind of outer space where if there's no star or planet or anything like that or asteroid in it, right? Just outer space in itself is not space in itself. It's a reflection of something that exists even when there are objects occupying it. So space isn't a particular place, and it isn't a particular object. It's something which is what's permitting objects to be, both very physical objects like the planet Earth and very, very subtle objects like a square meter of outer space filled with seemingly nothing or almost nothing. So in the same way, the quest for the eye is looking for something. And again, it comes to a sort of spaciousness. But that spaciousness is just a reflection of an underlying space. Because that spaciousness is caused by or marked off by thought. That space exists whether or not things occupy it. And so if you can recognize that, when I'm looking for the I, ultimately, it's not even ultimately any particular state of peace, but that the I is what is permitting the experience of anything at all, whether it be a state of peace or anything else. The I cannot be found by continuously removing stuff, because at the very end, even when you removed everything, you're still going to be noticing something specific, like, there's this state of peace. As soon as you notice it, now it's an object. So no particular state can be the I itself, just like no particular square meter can be space itself, just like no particular pause between sounds can be silence itself. But that these are abstractions for things that permit particular experiences.